Right, my translation of Oswald Spengler's Urfragen, which I'm translating as either primal questions or primordial questions. I'm on the fence there about those two. Let me know in the comments if you prefer primal because it's shorter and easier to say than primordial. Questions, and then I'm about a third of the way into it, about 100 pages. It's about a 300-page book, but I'm doing something that most scholars and editors would not do with the endnotes in the back. I'm transforming the endnotes into long commentaries where I'm commenting on Spengler, comparing him with Steiner, Gebser, Frobenius, Jung, Campbell, and so forth, going in there and just having fun with all these different thinkers and sort of rubbing their cosmologies up against each other and seeing what kind of friction results. So that's what the back is. It'll probably be about 100 pages worth of commentary, so it'll end up being a 400-page book. And I will put it out in both hardcover and paperback, but since this book will feature no color illustrations, it'll just have a few black and white images of Spengler himself and his office, and just a few things like that, just to liven it up a little bit. But it doesn't need any illustrations. It's a work of pure high European philosophy. And it's amazing. It's an absolutely amazing book. I am very surprised that this has never been translated into English before, because it is one of Spengler's absolute masterpieces. And it's all composed of aphorisms. It's in a different style from many of his other books. I think it's his second best book so far that I've read after Decline of the West. Way better than Man and Technics, which is related to it. It's sort of an offshoot from it. And his worst book by far is The Hour of Decision, because it's all politics. The entire book is just about grilling the left wing. It's kind of tedious. Once you start, Spengler's fundamentally a metaphysician. Once you start meddling with politics, like Thomas Mann made the same mistake, you're betraying your profession as a metaphysician. Metaphysics and politics do not mix. Do we need to remind ourselves of what happened in Germany in the World Wars, which was exactly about the mixture of Indo-Aryan metaphysics and mythology with right-wing politics, and what a disaster that was for all of us. We're lucky to still be here as a species. All right, so that's not what Spengler is. He is not a racist. The left, neither he nor Frobenius, the left dismisses him as a Nazi, and that's total ignorance. Nobody's done their homework. Spengler never joined the Nazi Party, unlike Heidegger, who did for a year. And Carl Schmitt, who had a huge influence on leftist political thought. You cannot understand Giorgio Agamben's very far left book, Homo Sacer, without having read Carl Schmitt. And he remained an unrepentant Nazi all the way to the end while writing The Nomos of the Earth, which is an absolute masterpiece. So you got to use your brain here. People who are lazy intellectually and don't want to do their homework, like the Jordan Petersons of the world, dismissing deconstruction and postmodern theory without ever having bothered to sit down and actually try to understand what it's saying. The world is full of these lazy types who just want things microwave media packaged in a neat little kit where they don't have to do any thinking. Guess what? The world doesn't work that way. The world is complex, full of ambiguities, nuance, and all kinds of humanity. All right, so that out of the way. Now, this book does remind me of Heidegger's book, the Beiträge, the contributions, because it too was written as a series of aphorisms, and it too was not published until a few decades after his death in the 1980s, late 80s. And it too is one of his best books. In that case, possibly his best. This book is not better than Decline of the West, but it's in the ballpark. It's up there. So I want to read this chapter that I just finished completing. It's chapter 2, Awakening versus Being Awake, the I, and the world. Spengler likes to think in terms of polarities, and this is what Rudolf Steiner, when he read Volume 1 of Decline of the West, gave a couple of public lectures. 2 or 3 of them criticized him mainly for, is relying on dichotomies and polarities. But that's just the nature of his thought. And these guys, Steiner, Spengler, Heidegger, were all essentially doing and more or less saying the same thing. I even came across an aphorism. It's in chapter 3, which I'm in the middle of working on, where Spengler mentions the possibility of reincarnation. He leaves room for it. That surprised the hell out of me. So there's a lot of complexity, and it's wonderful. This is the late period of Spengler, which I've never read, his later works. And it's wonderful watching his work evolve over time. It becomes more and more nuanced and complex. It's recognizably Spengler, but it's a little different. He's growing and changing as a thinker. So we'll do a reading here. And now I did a reading of about the first third of the first chapter. The first chapter is composed of 111 aphorisms, and I read 40 of them. I'm not going to read the rest online here because I want you to buy the book. I don't want to give it all away for free. Translation is a lot of work. All right. Awakening. Now, this is great because this is where Spengler starts to merge into areas like with Jean Gebser, whom he never read, but this is all about structures of consciousness now and their evolution over time in this chapter. 1. When you wake in the morning and rub your eyes, you see only colors and shapes around you. A few moments later, as your awareness returns, they become things. You begin to reflect more sharply on where you are, on the day that is breaking, on yourself. At last, your habit of thought fully awakens far beyond the awareness of a dog or a sparrow seizes you, and will not let you go until sleep slowly releases you again. In those few seconds, you pass once more through the 1,000-year history of human thought, from the plant-like state of deep sleep, that would be deep dreamless sleep, through the wakefulness of the simplest animals, to the watching and sensing of the human mammal, and finally to the bright and clear tension of word-shaped thinking that marks your purely human fate. You recall your room and the world as nature returns. You remember yesterday and your intention for today, and you know yourself again as part of your life story. Now, I immediately thought of the opening pages of Proust's Remembrance of Things Past and wondered if Spengler read them, but I couldn't find any evidence online that he had, and he never makes any references to Proust anywhere. I even checked in his letters, the Briefe, and no references to Proust in there anywhere. So this is pretty amazing. Proust does the same thing on the first page of that book. 2. The first fact that presses on the waking mind is the world. Everything that surrounds us. It reminds me of the opening line of Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, the opening line, the world is everything that is the case. In fact, everywhere that surrounds is never a single impression, but always the whole environment. The world awakens with me. The natural person at once has the sky above, the earth below, the horizon, mountains, sea, trees, birds, and the prevailing blue, green, or yellow of the landscape. Even the modern artificial person at once sees the walls, the desk, the books. To fall asleep means that the world fades away. 3. With awakening, whether to the day or to life at birth in the morning, my space arises. The self, a stream of life, exists only in time. Sleep has no space. As a third dimension, my life, the life of my senses, shapes the world into space. The foreign exists as cosmos, but it takes form as space only in wakefulness. 4. The basic fact of wakefulness is the world. Every animal, when awake, has a world shaped by its own nature. Underlying this fact lies the contrast between self and world, between what is one's own and what is foreign. In addition, every waking being knows with inner certainty experiences that do not belong to the world. Feelings, moods, fear, pain, longing, boredom, and so on. From this arises the recognized contrast between soul and body, feeling and sensation. 5. We humans awaken to the world of light. Animals sometimes inhabit other worlds. For higher forms, closer to humans, sight is the most important way to grasp the world. It is developed from the sun. The turning of the earth creates the contrast between light and night, with the moon, stars, and the glow of deep-sea creatures. For all beings, wakefulness means wakefulness in light. We sense how other beings experience the same world in similar ways. This marks the difference between cosmos and microcosm within the macrocosm. From this world that we consciously perceive, something stands apart, something that exists, but remains unfelt. Existence, life, the soul. And these even read a little bit like prose poems, and I think I remember Spengler somewhere talking about certain prose writers who were actually writing prose poetry. He's one of them. 6. On the half of the globe that lies in shadow, life sleeps and becomes vegetative. Only on the sunlit half does it stay awake. This regular change appears there as day and night, here as waking and sleeping. A longer interruption of this radiation and the small accident called life on this earth would end again. 7. Day and night, meaning what we humans perceive with all our senses as the outer image of the world, form a kind of cosmic rhythm, imagined as the shadow and light sides of the earth as it moves around the sun. Yet only animals with eyes, and not all of them, recognize this as the alternation of waking and sleeping. 8. Summer and winter form a vital rhythm. The day-night rhythm is sensed and seen, brought about by light. Warmth and existence belong to the core, vegetative existence. Light and wakefulness belong to the outer shell. I need to change that to outer layer. Shell, the German word is Schale, and he really means the outer layer of us, the layer of the mind and the senses, the intellectual mind and the senses. So I need to change that. Animal wakefulness and conscious self. Warmth affects life in general, while light acts on a special sense. Stages of wakefulness. 9. It is a primal fact that when we awaken and come to awareness, the same world surrounds us. Animals and children grow restless when they sense nothing familiar upon waking. There is then an inner certainty that never arises as a question in wakefulness, the continuity of the world, and with it the constant experience that it is the same world for all, the world of wakefulness, the world of day. The world around us and the self within it, two impressions whose contradiction remains an eternal question. Every deep person of our time has in childhood a moment when this riddle becomes clear to them, the microcosm within the macrocosm. 10. Animal consciousness, sensory perception, is suspended in unconsciousness, especially during sleep. What remains is a purely vegetative existence. Human self-awareness, thinking in words, the ego, is suspended, e.g., through mental agitation, fatigue, etc. What remains is sentient animal consciousness, animalistic, or vegetative existence. 3 stages can be distinguished. 1. Vegetative Dasein, tendency, instinct, blood. 2. Animal consciousness, thinking in words. This includes the senses and limbs. 3. Cultural self, language and thinking. Shell, the outer layer, brain. And he's starting to sound more and more like Rudolf Steiner here. And he will say at some point somewhere here that humans have souls, whereas animals or plants do not have souls. But he doesn't have the vocabulary that Steiner has to designate the etheric body, which we share in common with plants, which is purely morphogenetic and passionless, desireless. It does not suffer. And the astral body, which we share in common with animals, and animals have passions and desires, and they suffer too, like we do. And then humans have the ego in the sense of self-awareness. We're aware that we're aware of ourselves. Only humans have that. 11. A sleeping animal is entirely limited to a plant-like consciousness, to vegetative life. Only the cosmic lives within it. When its eyes open and it awakens, it turns toward the rest of the world, which thus presents itself to this small world as a large world. The cosmos splits into the microcosm and its associated macrocosm. That is the meaning of being awake. The individual being has thus freed itself from the spell of the cosmos. It lives in it, against it, and yet under its power. The contradiction between free will and fate disappears, for what I want is commanded of me as will. Maybe I should capitalize that will to make it resonate with Schopenhauer's will, cosmic will. 12. Being awake is life's battle stance against the world. Self against other, microcosm against macrocosm, conflict, polarity, small world against Umwelt. Umwelt, I deliberately left it untranslated because it translates into English as environment, but it doesn't just mean that. It means self plus world. The Umwelt is a particular world that is created by a particular organism with particular sense organs that are exclusive to it, whereby it selects out from the world, the vast world of stimuli, only those stimuli that are relevant to it. And that is the influence upon Spengler of the German theoretical biologist Jakob von Uexküll. He did read him because he mentions him in here, and that is what he discovered. Uexküll did probably around the 1920s. The one book that's been translated into English dates from 1934. I think it's called A Foray into Worlds of Humans and Animals. Worlds, plural, is deliberate there. Every organism creates its own Welt, its world round, that is unique to it. Opposition characterizes being awake, feeling, understanding, Thinking. Attention is the characteristic of sentinels, perceiving, comprehending, observing, noticing, meaning in relation to the world. 13. The fact of being awake, the primordial form of perception, the contrast between self and other, microcosm and macrocosm. This is a profound mystery. Skilled systematizers are quick to devise a scheme using terminology invented for this purpose. My idea, appearance, thing in itself. And of course he's talking about Kant there and Schopenhauer, the distinction that Kant makes between the world as it appears to our senses, because we have space-time and causality as a priori forms that the mind brings to its experiences, just like Feineux's animal organisms brings with it and makes certain experiences possible, but then beyond that there is a realm of things as they are in and of themselves, which we can never know, according to Kant. It's a noumenal realm versus the visible realm of appearance, Vorstellung, the realm of appearance. And then Schopenhauer comes along and says, the world is my Vorstellung, which you can either translate as the world is my idea or the world is my representation. I prefer representation because idea makes it sound like he's talking about Platonic ideas, and he works Platonic ideas into his whole vision, but it's a separate thing from how the world appears before us in a phenomenal sense, covering up a vast cosmic will in place of things as they are in and of themselves. Schopenhauer thinks we can get access to knowledge of thing in itself, Ding an sich, because it's a cosmic will that animates all of us, everything that is, even gravity and electromagnetism. The fact of being, okay, let's see, and so I put a footnote there to that effect, not a footnote, rather an endnote, where I go through exactly what I just said. In fact, appearance and reality, like seeing, light, and what is seen, are one. Only when we think about it do the concepts separate. Just as what we see is conditioned by our seeing, so too is this seeing an element of the cosmic. Here remains a question without an answer. The systematizer, as an abstract thinker, seeks to elevate his conceptual abstraction to an absolute world, subordinating reality as relative to it, God, eternity, etc. This is not the world, but a system of thought. Instead of a cathedral, a building skeleton. Instead of a human being, his X-ray image. 14. Being awake, Wachsein, is most clearly understood at its limits upon waking or falling asleep as mere sensation without understanding. Colors, sounds, outlines, and scents are vaguely present in space without any precise location. Consciousness slowly returns or fades away. 15. Mere sensation is meaningless. When you are half asleep and perceive the color red or light or noise, without yet determining what these words mean. But when awake, logic and understanding come into play. The fox sniffs and determines. Deer tracks just passed by, not far away, female, warned. That is already causal, spatial, logical. This interpretation of sensory impressions is abstracted by human speech, made independent and powerful. 16. Wachsein is perceived as felt understanding. There is no perception without understanding. Perception awakens understanding, draws attention to itself when it is not guided by understanding. Here he does agree with Schopenhauer, because Schopenhauer changes Kant in saying that perceiving something requires understanding, the application of Verstand, the intellect toward it. When he says, he gives an example, when I suddenly open my drapes, my poodle looks up because it's looking for the cause of the light that has just flooded the room. So causality is a priori in the brains of animals as well. So to perceive something, if you're a waking being, in the terms of Steiner, the astral body confers waking consciousness on beings as well as passions and desires. So there's some similarity here. The same applies to feeling. Only the awareness of blushing, palpitations, and breathless fear makes us aware of our feelings. Life dominates understanding, pervades it. The foreign and the familiar are also opposed here. Whether we feel the pulse of our blood as joy, fear, excitement, or perceive it, for example, tentatively as something foreign, is the same. To see oneself in the mirror means to see oneself as completely alienated. The core breaks through the shell, the outer layer, and the shell also registers itself. The shell has a relationship to the outside, to the foreign, and to the inside, to the familiar. This is the contrast between the sensory world and the life of the soul. This is what constitutes wakefulness, consciousness of the external and self-consciousness. Understanding is not independent. The thinker thinks when he wants or has to, i.e., when understanding is set in motion from within or from without, from the environment or from one's life. 17. There are different degrees and intensities of being awake: dull awareness, mere perception, understanding perception, perceptive understanding, observation, attentiveness, self-awareness. 18. Keeping your eyes open, seeing, is a form of being awake. Focusing your eyes on something, observing, trying hard to understand, smelling, listening, observing is the special state of being awake, which generally has the senses open without focusing them on anything. In general wakefulness, i.e., existing as an extended body in space, special consciousness stands out, that is, being aware of something. Everyone confuses this, including Klages. Now, Klages is a philosopher I haven't read yet, but I'm going to. He wrote a book called On Cosmogonic Eros that is about kind of a riff on Schopenhauer's will, Eros, and he goes through and examines this cosmic Eros in opposition to Thanatos, and then he also has an opposition between Geist or mind, intellect, versus the soul. And he says that the modern industrial civilization has committed the sin of crushing the soul with Geist, with mentality, and so forth. So I want to read that. So in the stream of seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, which is absorbed completely passively and without memory, details become noticeable. This results in knowing consciousness. The other is an awaking, unconscious, permanent state. Attention and memory belong together. 19. Being awake, that is, being conscious of one's body and one's skin. The body and the world are physically perceived as resistance in sensual form. The soul is felt. Finally, cogito ergo sum res cogitans. I think, therefore I am. The distinction between core and outer layer, now here I correctly translated shell as outer layer, which is what he's getting at. Not shell as in a dead thing. The distinction between core and outer layer goes deeper. Ancient and Indian divisions are artificial dissections. I will here complete the basic division of Faustian man. The core includes will, voluntas, striving, power. The outer layer includes intellectus, sensus, the world as representation. The core, soul, includes the mystery of the world. The outer layer, i.e. the senses, includes the surface of the world. The body belongs to the soul, the spirit, Geist, mind, to the senses. The fact of the individual being is felt in waking consciousness as soul and perceived as body. Now in German all the nouns are capitalized, but I have here capitalized soul because he does not mean any trivial thing by soul. Oh, it's such a soulful experience. He means the actual existence of an actual soul. Steiner believes in God and he believes in the soul, but he's indifferent to Christianity. He could care less about it. Or rather, Spengler read. 20. Consciousness can mean wakefulness as opposed to sleep, unconsciousness or recognition, perception, noticing, understanding, comprehending, feeling. The outer layer, senses and mind, wakes and sleeps. It belongs to the microcosm in relation to the macrocosm. The core also sleeps. It belongs to the cosmos, but the soul wakes up and goes to sleep. He's really talking about the astral body, which, when you go to sleep, leaves the physical and etheric bodies behind and sojourns through the astral plane where we have our dream experiences. We go to the same place when we die. The etheric body remains behind to repair the damages inflicted upon the physical body by the passions and desires of your daily addictions, alcohol, sugar, processed foods, so forth. The etheric body is the morphogenetic field that plants have and that we share in common with them. So that's really what he's talking about here. Soul is a possibility that is only realized while awake. However, there are also unconscious, sleeping, and inexplicable, ununderstood feelings. I guess that's an awkward translation there, ununderstood. I need to rethink of that. 21. When each day dawns, or when the soul of a child awakens, or primitive humanity arises at the dawn of history, each of these follows the same morphological sequence. First, the sensual stage, mythical, physiognomic, pictorial, vivid, and then the conceptual, systematic, abstract thinking. Now, I've put a footnote here to the effect that this essentially agrees with both Steiner and Gebser in terms of the unfolding of consciousness through time. The sensual stage corresponds to the first generation of high civilization, which is the Egyptian and the Mesopotamian, which Rudolf Steiner says the task was to develop the sentient soul through images and pictures, but it's not conceptual. Philosophy did not exist in that first generation. It's only in the second generation, which corresponds to, that one corresponded to Gebser's mythical consciousness structure, but the second generation of the Greeks and the Hebrews, the Persians, the Chinese, and so forth, corresponds to the development of the conceptual form of abstract thinking that follows the initial, and corresponds then to Rudolf Steiner's intellectual soul, which is the same thing as Jean Gebser's mental consciousness structure. So all of these philosophers they're interchangeable if you know how to play with them. The dream, 22. The ghostly world of appearance, Wachsein, as macrocosm in relation to microcosm, dissolves in intoxication, when falling asleep, during fainting spells, as a result of hunger, fasting of saints, in lustful intoxication, in anger, or in ecstasy. The foaming blood in states of highest excitement dissolves the tension between microcosm and macrocosm. Then the partition between the two dissolves, and they are fused in the cosmos. And here it seems to me that he's invoking Nietzsche's Apollo and Dionysus, which is what he based the distinction between Wachsein and Dasein that he makes in the first chapter of Volume 2 of The Decline of the West. And he transforms the Apollonian mode into Wachsein, waking being, which is the outer layer that Spengler's talking about here. And then Dasein, which corresponds to the Dionysian, which has to do with instincts, pulse, beat, rhythm, the circulation of the blood, the genitals, and so forth. These are all autonomic processes that are just going on. And the Wachsein, the waking being, which corresponds to Steiner's astral body, is simply along for the ride, you might say. 23. The dream is partly a waking. There is sleepwalking, talking in your sleep, laughing or moving. The unforgettable dream has already arisen at the threshold of awakening and been transformed upon awakening. So fragments of the outer layer, senses and thinking, become awake, seeing, hearing, muscles, etc. And indeed, it is waking up is a gradual experience that you tend to notice more and more the older you get, the longer it takes, and the more aware you are of various stages as you're waking up. You're in the dream, and then you slide out of the dream, and you're starting to analyze the dream, or at least I do. You're starting to think about the dream. Then you're sliding into forgetting the dream almost entirely. It's difficult to hold on to it as you're waking, and the world becomes clear, and you forget what day it is, and then you have to remind yourself, oh, today's Wednesday, I have a paper due, or whatever. I have a bill to pay, whatever it is. It is a gradual process. And the same thing with Jean Gebser, that he means to characterize the whole history of humanity as doing that very same thing, a gradual process of awakening, from the archaic to the magical, to the mythical, to the mental, to the integral. It's a gradual process of awakening. 24. Dreams only occur in a state of semi-sleep when one is not fully conscious, when one is overtired, overworked, especially mentally exhausted, emotionally agitated, depressed, and has gone to sleep. Close to awakening, when the outer layer is already stirring and the layers of deep sleep are beginning to dawn. So he's making the same distinction that's made in the Upanishads that Gebser borrows from, between deep dreamless sleep, then dreaming consciousness, then waking consciousness, which corresponds temporally to past, present, and future. Even the limbs do not sleep, otherwise the sleeper would not toss and turn, thrash about, sleepwalk, scream, sigh, especially when their stomach is full and they have a fever or cry out in pain. For a few moments, fleeting images and thoughts arise, senses and mind become active, which only when awakening are logically sequenced or forgotten. All clearly recounted dreams only take shape when one reflects on them upon awakening, i.e. when one classifies them in the form of waking experience. That is absolutely correct. All dream narratives are products of awakening into the form of reality. Otherwise, they are easily forgotten as incommensurable consequences. Stimuli include, for example, memories of past experiences, often the sound of words, fears of what is to come, random sensory impressions. Children dream more than adults, and those who are mentally and sensually refined dream more than farmers or hunters who have healthy sleep. The I and the world. Primordial facts, 25. One fundamental fact is the sum. I am here, or my body, my soul, my person, me in general, as opposed to others, cogito ergo sum. You can see how sum eventually evolves into am. The two words sound related, sum, am. But this is arbitrary, for even when I am not thinking, I am. This is an unconditional certainty that is not susceptible of rational analysis. It is identical to the other certainty that the world is here. Every day I know with self-evidence that I and the world are the same as yesterday, no matter how much else may be different. What the I is cannot be analyzed. Reality is what amounts to I and the world, the foreign, the other. 26. Fact underlies everything: soul, body, wakefulness, existence, senses, and more. To the human eye, it appears as an image of color and shape, to thought as a concept, to feeling as an inner stirring confirmed outwardly through expression. Physiognomy can intuitively grasp the symbolic meaning of gestures and movements as signs of life. Now, this word physiognomy does not mean, I looked it up on the Google AI, it does not mean what the Google AI is trying to tell you that it means, that it's a pseudoscience that's outdated because it was used to justify racism. And in origin, in the Renaissance, by, I think it was Giovanni della Porta, if I remember right, the science of judging a person's character by how they look. So there's that. There's some truth to that. I'm afraid I have to be politically incorrect and tell you that I can tell by looking at a person, looking at their picture, whether it's going to be somebody whose character is going to be threatening to me or not. I can tell, especially as you get older and you have good intuition. By physiognomy, he means rather doing that same thing with cultures, culture forms, not analyzing them, but feeling them out, their contours. It's almost got a more tactile sense to it because he opposes it to analytical thought, the thought of scholars, professors, systematic thinkers like Kant and Aristotle, and so forth. Physiognomy is what Goethe did with his cultural morphology, or what Plato did. His ideas Plato's ideas might as well be called forms because they have a very sensuous, tactile feel to them. So you can't just dismiss Spengler's use of physiognomy as racist. It absolutely is not. You're misunderstanding how he is using this term. Systematics, on the other hand, arranges by observation and analyzes through concepts. Ignorabimus. What we claim to know does not exist. Neither physiognomy nor systematics penetrates the inner realm of the self. Physiognomy reveals inner kinship and form, such as the shape of a movement, as analogy, not as a critically established identity. Soul and body, senses and reason form four currents of life, not as entities, but as processes of a single life. We distort them when we name them as nouns instead of verbs. It would be truer to speak of living in soul, living in body, living in sensing, living in understanding. Only in the high-cultured person at stages C and D does understanding separate and assert itself as an independent power. So it's interesting. He has a lot of criticisms of the sciences, as does Heidegger. These two thinkers are basically doing the same thing, questioning the intellect, questioning the sciences, questioning this whole process of de-worlding subjects and putting them into abstract, analytical, XYZ Cartesian phase spaces, whereas they don't exist in such phase spaces. That's the intellect projecting a geometrical space upon them, de-worlding them to rape them and rob them of all of their qualities, both primary and secondary. So there's a lot of critique here of rationality, intellect, and so forth, that Spengler is very skeptical of. Now, this I put a footnote here. At stages C and D refers to his four-stage model of culture, of human history, which after his encounter with Leo Frobenius caused him to lengthen his view of history. Instead of just a series of random 9 civilizations which are completely unconnected with each other and previous history being just a chaos, he realized through reading Frobenius's work on indigenous peoples, especially in Africa, that they have earth symbols too, and there are cultural phases and stages there. So he goes back and he divides the Paleolithic into the lower Paleolithic, which is mostly the Neanderthals and their culture forms, and they do have them. And then the upper Paleolithic with modern Homo sapiens and their culture forms. And he gives them, surprisingly, the unimaginative stage A, stage B, stage C, stage D. That's kind of surprising for him. And then at stage C, we get the Neolithic, and that's why he says stages C and D. D would be the high cultures, the Hochkulturen, where conceptual thinking begins and understanding begins to separate from all of these other Dasein processes. 27, I forgot to center that. I'll have to go back. I'm noticing a lot of things here that this is not a final version by any means. This is a work in progress. And I notice things too when I read it out loud that I don't notice when I read it silently. So I forgot to center that 27 there. The tension between microcosm and macrocosm is a primordial fact. The conflict between them, the opposition, the polarity. This also includes the polarity of sensory world and soul life. Yet soul and world remain a unity grounded in the cosmos. The stages of consciousness. Beginning to sound more and more like Jean Gebser here. Now, Jean Gebser could not have read this book because it was not available to the public until the 1960s, and the ever-present origin was published in 1949. 28. What can we be certain of? Naturally, only when awake, for in sleep we have no awareness. 1. I feel that I exist, stirred in my soul, content, unhappy, longing, anxious, burdened, and so on. 2. I see, touch, hear, smell, and sense my body in the world around me. I know that I see. 3. I reflect on this. This reminds me a little bit, too, of Rudolf Steiner's model of the ego, which has 3 subcomponents to it. The one is the sentient soul, which takes in sensory data from the outer world. 2 is the intellectual soul, which then reflects on that data. 3 then is the consciousness soul, which then applies free will toward acting upon that data. Similar model. These are 4 immediate certainties: soul and body, senses and reason. In the waking state of the first level of consciousness, I notice many things at the second level of consciousness, though not everything. I sense a mood, I see my body, I know that I see, I understand that I think. This noticing includes not only understanding, but more. Unconsciousness as the negation of the first level of consciousness appears in sleep, hypnosis, or fainting. Unconsciousness as the negation of the second level of consciousness means failure to notice. From simple beings to great predators, from early humans to city dwellers, the scope of noticing steadily grows. Yes, it does. Consciousness gradually increases, as Gebser says. It gradually wakes up from the sleep of the magical, which corresponds to deep dreamless sleep, to the mythical, which corresponds to the dreaming consciousness, to the mental world of the second generation, Toynbee's second generation of the Hochkulturen, of the Greeks and the Hebrews, Persians, Chinese, and so forth, to the mental consciousness structure, and then the later phase of the mental, beginning in the Renaissance with Euro-American civilization, and even sharper clarity comes into being. But now we're moving into the integral, which is a different world altogether, that is a world, it's as though we were out of those 3 consciousness structures and looking at them all and their structural morphologies. Each one, just like Spengler's civilizations, each one of Gebser's consciousness structures has a morphology, which is evident in his charts in the back of the book, that are meant to rhyme with and compete with Spengler's charts in the back of the book. They're both doing cultural morphology. Let's see, we're on the dualities of the world, 29. Cogito ergo sum. No. I see the world, therefore 2 facts stand certain: I and the world. Theoretical brooding clings to the manner of the process, but these 2 premises simply are. 30. The whole world is dualistic, as are all attempts to penetrate its essence. This rests on the fact that the essence of every freely moving being lies in the tension between microcosm and macrocosm, and every image of the world exists only for a being in motion. From the fundamental polarity of microcosm and macrocosm, of self and other, of I and world, arise all distinctions: feeling and sensing, soul and body, I and world, space and time, nobility and priesthood. We perceive through opposites. We think in opposites, and every concept has formed in opposing pairs. The essence of distinction, of critique, lies in recognizing contrasts. Even truth stands as the opposite of error, and nothing as the opposite of something. He's absolutely right about that. I don't care what Steiner's critiques of him are, being too stuck in polarities. Gebser critiques polarity as Spengler being stuck in the mythical consciousness structure, which is based on polarity, such as Sky Father, Earth Mother, the self, the Atman, against the macro self, the Brahman, and so forth. Nonetheless, we do live in a world that is structured as pairs of opposites. That is a fact. The image of the world, 31. The 17th century taught that objects produce our knowledge. Kant refuted this and taught instead that the form of our knowledge produces objects. That too has been refuted. What remains? The insight in Goethe's teaching that nothing is produced here at all for production is only a form of human thought. Knowing and objects stand as poles through which the cosmos unfolds into microcosm and macrocosm. 32. The secret of the world appears in the form of reality before the being that experiences and feels. It is akin both within and outside the being. The structure of all living senses and minds fixes it, binds it, and strips it of life in the same way. Thus, the structure of sense and understanding has formed out of the structure of the secrets. It recognizes itself and nothing else. For matter, form, and law are structures of understanding. Color, sound, and scent are reality as lived. Space, shape, and law are understood form, the form of what is grasped. What people mean and seek in knowledge is impossible, yet what I think when I think is the will to think. 33. The outside, the foreign, takes shape when I grasp it or it grasps me. It appears to me as an image of the world, just as to the beetle here or the bird there, each in its own way, as its own world, its possession. And yet what Kant overlooked, my sense, which shapes this world, remains only a servant of the outside. Goethe recognized this. If the eye were not sun-like, it could never behold the sun. Between microcosm and macrocosm stands appearance, woven from both, belonging to neither alone. 34. The one day that embraces the wakefulness of all beings, the one world shared by all senses of the same kind, this is the community from which language and spirit grow, while slumber and dreaming belong to each alone. It is not spirit that is shared, Geist, meaning intellect here, as Claudius claims, but seeing, the link between sun and individual being. Therefore, the world of vision is common to those who see alike, and from it language and spirit arise. The world of day, ruled, illumined, and warmed by the sun, is the true common ground, where the sun gives the law, not the realm of spirit, which emerges only afterward. Spirit not in the deep sense of what we mean in the New Age when we say spiritual, but the opposite, the intellect, which the New Age likes to trample on. But that's what he's using the word Geist to refer to here, as Claudius also does. And Hegel as well, with the phenomenology of the Geist, the mind. 35. Myself and the world. That in itself is incorrect because it is not my world, but our world. We all perceive it identically, contrary to Schopenhauer. But then, contrary to Kant, it is not I who shape the world view through the nature of my understanding, but at the same time, the world shapes my understanding according to its nature. The unity of human understanding in the image of the world cannot be overthought. The question of where the center of gravity lies is meaningless. In the contrast between microcosm and macrocosm, outer layer, world outer layer, the impression of two things is formed, I and the world, whereas in reality there is only one. It's interesting how, and I saw the typos, you don't need to point them out, it's interesting how he's sort of transcending the polaristic dichotomy between microcosm, macrocosm, self against world, in saying that they're both productions of the one world that is. So in a way, he's transcending his own polarity of self versus world in saying that. Kind of interesting. 36. The space is not mine, but ours. The world is the cosmos that develops in all individual beings as sentient understanding. It is not the animal hiding place that has an environment, but the world that has created animal understanding. Everyone feels their own feelings. Everyone sees the same thing, myself, our world. 37. The world is my idea. That's how Schopenhauer begins his book, World as Will and Vorstellung, which is either representation or idea. And if you translate Vorstellung as idea, then you translate the first line as, the world is my idea, which is a little more startling than the word representation. No, but the image of the world is my creation. I see myself in it. It is part of my being. But I am a creation of the world. The connection cannot be broken. What lies behind appearances is a meaningless question, materialistically conceived like Kant's thing in itself. 38. But everything we know, the whole picture of this world with its forms of time and space, which some researchers consider proven, is somehow our picture, that of people from higher cultures. What does an animal see, hear, or smell? Are the constellations there for butterflies and snakes? Does a fox see the sun? It notices some kind of brightness, nothing more. Only higher humans believe they know what it is. It is imagination, an image that is created by the one who creates it, and through which he is created, for the eye and the sun are one, and then also proven. Since seeing and proving stem from the same creative disposition in humans, one does not prove the other. The image that Lao Tzu, Plato, and Goethe believed they could prove was very different. They proved themselves, nothing else. What is that? There is no answer to this question. The historical view alone protects us from believing in eternal knowledge and scientific epistemological knowledge, because he polarizes history on the one hand, with the realm of facts within it that change constantly, versus the realm of eternal truths, the realm of the priest, then the philosopher, then the scientist. They all believe in eternal truths, whereas in reality, these truths are not eternal. They change from culture to culture. What was true, what was an atom for a Greek is not a Faustian atom at all. They're two very different myths that are being created there. Only a historical perspective can protect us from believing in eternal knowledge, in scientific epistemological truth. Now, it occurs to me that even the biologist Rupert Sheldrake, who lived in India for a while and came up with his theory of morphogenetic fields, which is basically the same thing as Steiner's etheric body, although Steiner's etheric body is confined only to living things, whereas Sheldrake's morphogenetic fields apply to everything. Even the so-called laws of the universe, such as gravity, all the various gravitational constants, E equals mc squared, and all of these things that are supposed to be eternal, might actually be not laws but habits. Because as far as Sheldrake is concerned, with his theory of morphic resonance, the longer something has been what it is, because it's in resonance with itself, the stronger its morphic field is, and the longer it lasts. And because those laws are older than anything else, they may just be habits that are so ingrained that they appear to be laws, but might actually not be. Only those who see that these eternal truths change with people, that they are only an expression of an era, an inner culture, and are then forgotten, ridiculed, refuted by others, such as Copernicus ridiculing the Ptolemaic cosmology. It was not true for him any longer. 39. My eye and the light, impression and expression are identical in their depth. The world is also within me. I am an element of the world. For the fox, the hunter is an element of its world. For the hunter, the dog is an element of his world. 40. What we truly know, i.e. know vividly, is the relationship between the outer layer, which is capable of thinking, feeling, and seeing, and the mystery between the microcosm and the macrocosm. These merely quantitative facts are the practical content of natural science, in other words, expressed in verbal thought, what all animals experience. The causal principle is an abstraction from sensory facts. These causal laws, systems, lie neither in nature nor in spirit, as materialism and idealism would have it, but in the unity of both. Spirit in itself and nature in itself. There lies an error in thinking. The thinking machine, as Kant describes it, is only a physical system applied to the image of pure thinking, and vice versa. The physiognomic experience behind this veil, penetrating it, dominating it, is the same as the mystery of the outside, of the world. We do not know it. We only notice its practical activity, its effect, its reality, its Wirklichkeit. 41. The world is a macrocosm, not a cosmos. 42. The image of the world we create reflects ourselves. For this reason it carries an inner necessity. We can discover nothing outside ourselves. When we speak of the world, we speak of ourselves, yet only a few can draw this image. Most of those who reach such depth need the creators of these images to recognize their own nature. This defines the purpose of great philosophy. It reveals to longing but uncreative minds their true being. What Nietzsche wrote held this necessity. He gave us the vision of our kind. 43. The decisive fact is this. The world in which man lives is one he has shaped himself. It belongs to him, and he cannot free himself from it to see a world without man. Yet it also dies with him. The world of the ancient man has vanished. Our Faustian universe will vanish with the Faustian gaze, from which it arose. So what is the world? That question has no answer. But this world, closed to the wisest among us, as much as to the sparrow and the worm, lives. We are its creators, just as we are, with our gaze upon it. 44. We know only our image of the world, where what is ours and what is foreign, our feelings and something beyond us intertwine. We fumble at it, measuring, dissecting, yet again nothing but this same image in slightly different colors. We know it only as an image, that it signifies something, but what it signifies remains an eternal mystery. This image of the world mirrors man or the animal once again. It belongs to him, soul of his soul, sleeping and waking, rising and dying with him. The way he sees the world reflects man once more. He cannot step outside himself. He remains imprisoned within his senses. 45. The deer, the eagle, and the farmer each inhabit their own Umwelts. The scholar, the priest, or the scientist has one as well, and in principle it does not differ. It is only more carefully thought out. In fact, it appears in this reflective form only during moments of research. While walking, it becomes much like the farmer's again. Yet these supposedly objective worlds rest on a flaw in thought. The thinking person forgets himself, even though everything arises from his sense impressions, his laws of thought, his causality. He believes all this exists in itself and that he merely lives within it by chance, while in truth it is his image and he himself stands at its center. This makes him forget the crucial question, what is this subject that creates the world? Broadly speaking, world is an emanation of a living being. Its waking life is part of its existence. And when we all feel certain that we live in the same world and speak of the same world, that certainty itself is the problem. The fundamental error of all learned scientists lies here. They first construct the image of the world scientifically from their own standpoint and then attempt to think away the subject that created it. All excellent points here. And I think I'll stop here. I don't want to give the whole book away. It's awesome. It's a wonder to behold. The identity of the world is reality, the world is appearance. Those are brilliant sections, his attacks on Kant and Schopenhauer. And then the next section, the third one I'm working on right now, knowledge and belief, speaking and thinking. All right, this will be available on Amazon KDP through my Iconic Books press in maybe 2 or 3 months. We'll see how it goes here with the translating. It's very slow. And I already saw, reading through that, a lot of awkward sentences that are going to need to be rethought and sharpened a bit. Some words are going to need to be changed and so forth. It's a different experience every time you interact with a text via a different medium, whether it's orality or whether it's printed or whether you're typing it out on a typewriter. It's a different experience every time. Reading it in a Word document is very different from reading it in an InDesign document. You notice different things, and then when you speak it, you notice different things again. All that's McLuhan's media theory. Okay, that's it for now.